down to Biscayne.
Yikes. 5 on the floor, ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing, you can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars, wearing bubble frogs. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the floor playing, got it all band. Y'all seen the block, stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, it's power, have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, and Alex Toledo, plus others from the 5 Reasons Sports Network.
Welcome back to 5 on the Floor. I am your host, Greg Sylvander. Tonight's floor plan with me, Alex Toledo. You can follow him on Twitter at Tropical Blanket. We are going to dive into the Miami Heat's playoff rotation. I hesitate to say that because it could be a play-in rotation initially, and what we saw recently against the Utah Jazz that may inform some of that decision-making going forward. So we're going to dive into that, look at who might get squeezed out of the 9-man rotation. Maybe it's only trust 8, maybe it's only trust 7, who knows? So we're going to touch on all those things. Just as we look ahead, there's a dozen or so games, 13, maybe 12. I've lost count now. And it's go time. So we're going to look at the lineups. Before we do, shouting out one of the great sponsors at 5 Reasons Sports Network and at 5 on the Floor. Do you have a water leak and you can't find where it's coming from? Call Water Cleanup of Florida at 954-579-0356 for immediate assistance. With over 60 years of combined experience, Michael, Robert, George, and their team is prepared to handle all types of leak detection issues 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. After the leak has been located and repaired, Water Cleanup of Florida will then clean, dry, and fully restore the damaged area. Water Cleanup of Florida is fully licensed, insured, and certified to provide the one-stop shopping that busy homeowners and all people who are trying to get these projects done, contractors, they're the right entity to go to get the entire project done, start to finish. The service areas include Miami, Broward, and Palm Beach counties. Call Michael anytime on his personal cell, 954-579-0356. Again, that's 954-579-0356. Or visit their website, wcufl.com. Check out the 5-star reviews on Google. They've got over 75 of them. Water Cleanup of Florida. If you have the schmutz, they have the guts. All right, so we're on the heels of a Miami Heat victory. Even when they win, everybody seems like they're in a bad mood these days. But they got a victory, Alex. It was a game that I think, just due to the way that the injury report broke down, with Zeller out and Yurt being inserted into those minutes, that pre-show we were we were in agreement that this is as close to a full group to assess a playoff rotation as we've seen. Now, obviously, there's lots of caveats to this. There's games to be played. There's injuries that could take place. There's lots of stuff that could happen. They could go to different combinations. Who knows? But right now, we think we have honed in on probably the 9-man rotation. So we want to talk about what that rotation looks like, what they're capable of, who they match up well with. Also, like when we look at this bench, I think it's inevitable as we go down the stretch here that they're not going to be able to avoid playing with Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo both on the bench. They're going to need Jimmy lineups with the bench that are good and Bam lineups that are good with the bench as well, so that they can lead those groups in a way that Tyler Hero hasn't necessarily done at the same way he did last year. Alex, I'll start with you here. Let's give the listeners a rundown of what we believe to be the rotation. I think everyone understands who the starting lineup is. But from your perspective, if we're talking the 9-man rotation beyond the 5 starters, who do you have penciled in so far?
Well, that's the thing. You're talking about a 9-man rotation, and you mentioned us talking pre-show, and all we have to go off of is last night's game because Caleb didn't play in the Magic game, and obviously Kyle wasn't playing before that. So assuming you sub in Zeller as the backup 5, not expecting Omer to just take his spot now when Zeller comes back. They played 10 last night, and that everybody didn't get equal minutes, so there's more to it than that. But they played 10 guys. Now, the thing that ended up happening was Max Strus was the guy whose minutes got cut short. He only ended up playing 7. So they played 10, but Max didn't play very much. And I think, something like that is kind of the way that it might happen in the playoffs. Maybe it's probably going to end up just being 9, but I don't know, because it doesn't seem like there's an obvious guy whose minutes to cut, because like I said, it's Max's minutes are the ones who were cut last night, as far as compared to what he's been playing all season. But he's actually been shooting well in the month of March, 37% from 3. The Heat have been shooting well as a team in the month of March. Obviously has not resolved their issues in any way. So there's obviously just ups and downs with sitting certain guys. Like a team that's struggled shooting maybe could use a Max Strus who's figuring out his shot a little bit and is shooting at a higher clip recently. But it's obviously not that just not that simple in general, because I think in the playoffs you have to make tough decisions, and they're going to tell you that in the press conferences, and it's going to be matchup dependent. So it's tough to you can't use a game in March versus the Jazz as a perfect simulation, but it's the only game we've got so far with kind of everybody healthy, with the including the acquisition of Kevin Love, Gabe in the starting lineup. So the most recent version of this team, this is what we got.
I find it fascinating that we could end up in a space where a team that we basically thought could only work if shooters were shooting well ends up shelving every specialist on the roster, leaning in so heavy on defense and essentially saying, Bam, Jimmy, Tyler, take us home. I think that is I don't anticipate anybody around the team, on the team, watching the team expected that to happen. You always felt like one shooter had to stay out there. And the way this has been trending, Alex, to your point with Max Strus getting 7 minutes, as you trim down a rotation come playoff time and up the minutes of guys like Jimmy and Bam, even a guy like Gabe Vincent or Tyler Hero, he had 37. I guess that's playoff time minutes, but Caleb could end up playing way over 30 in most playoff games. So you're right. Max is on the bubble there. But then you see games before, they win against Cleveland. He plays 25 minutes. He plays well. He plays 30-something minutes in Orlando. Caleb was out. So I guess another takeaway of this from my perspective is when you've got this little time to get ready for the playoffs, the fact that they're having to kind of sift through lineups and figure out what the rotation's going to be is not a great sign. I know that we've kind of came to the conclusion that either Jimmy or Bam needs to be on the floor at all times. Out of the bench guys, Alex, when they're out there specifically with Bam, let's hone in on him first here a little bit. Who are the guys that are playing best of the bench guys with Bam Adebayo specifically?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I was trying to look up some of the lineups there that have been positive, where it's kind of Bam leading them. And, because I've said on multiple pods, they have to figure out their rotation in their lineups. Obviously, acquiring the 2 bigs, threw in a couple of different layers there, starting Gabe now. You're trying to figure out, I think, the dynamics to it, a somewhat revitalized rotation in a way, since guys are now kind of playing different roles. Like, Kyle is back, but he played the 8th most minutes last night at 19. And yeah, like Oladipo and Love both got 21 last night, so that might not have been what we would have jotted it down at. Like, I would probably expect Kevin Love's minutes to go down a lot in the playoffs. I think last night they played kind of a bigger team in the Jazz. They play multiple bigs, even though, they can all shoot. But I think maybe they felt a little bit comfortable with Love to play him 20 last night. I could easily see his minutes going down to like 12 in the playoffs. Like you said, guys like Caleb, perhaps a Gabe or Depot, I think just guys who Spo is probably more comfortable with staying on the floor in multiple different matchups will end up playing more, and they're probably going to take on the identity of a smaller, more dynamic defensive team, because that's what they're going to end up playing into their strengths. I think is what's going to happen in the playoffs, and try to problem solve that way and just hope that enough shots fall. But as far as the actual bench lineups, there's some stuff you can go off of. Like, you have a lineup with Vic, Tyler, Strus, Caleb, and Bam. 15.19 net rating. Very, very good. You know, they played 63 minutes. So that's an example of one. You have Lowry, Hero, Max, Caleb, Bam in 116 minutes. They're plus 4.41 net.
Okay.
So that one's not awesome, but it's good to very good.
Yeah,
You
with
know,
that many minutes behind it.
yeah, that's fine. You know, and then with kind of the revitalized rotation, an example of a Jimmy one you could go to that they haven't gone to very much, but I think we could kind of see variations of this is Gabe, Tyler, Jimmy, Love, and Zeller. They've only played 7 minutes so far. They have a net rating of 46.15. So, you know, that's
There's
obviously
certain
not gonna.
matchups where I would pay to see Zeller and Love on the court in a playoff game clobbering people. But continue. Sorry.
No, it's I don't think we're gonna. It's a good point though, because I don't think we're gonna get very much of Love and Zeller playing together in the playoffs. Maybe a couple of minutes here and there, like whatever we're seeing now. I think it's gonna get probably divided by two. It's gonna get cut in half there. As far as them playing together, we're gonna see more. I think just more mobility in general. I think is what's gonna lean into. So again, just to go off of last night's game, just so everybody can kind of have it in their heads. The game log, right? Jimmy played 31. He's going to play it a lot more than that in the playoffs. I mean, you hope, right?
Yeah. Let's go for 41 or so.
Oh my God, that would be amazing. Imagine that. Kevin Love played 21. I think that goes down. Bam played 37. That's a good amount. He's still going to play more than that in the playoffs. I can almost guarantee you it's going to be 40 or higher. So that obviously tells you about how much Zeller's going to play. And Omer played 11 last night. So if you subtract, I mean, if you put Zeller in there and, you know, you probably subtract for however many minutes Bam ends up playing, he's probably going to get like 6 or 7 minutes.
Yeah. Just
right?
Total relief minutes. And also to the Kevin Love point, I think that I get the sense that he was basically, you know, like they said, you'll come here and start, but come playoff time, I don't know that that's going to be the case. I think that there's much more of a chance that he could end up not starting in a certain series or in a certain game, and it be understood that now it's all about winning.
Or he keeps starting and they just cut his minutes a little short. Like he might come out of the game a minute or two earlier than he usually does. Instead of playing the first 7 minutes, he plays the first 5. And it's little things like that cut down on his minutes. And yeah, and look, just to, you know, round out the rest of the game log, you got Tyler playing 38 last night, Gabe at 27, Caleb at 27. And like I mentioned, Victor and also at 21, and with Kyle at 19. So I don't know if that all of that sticks out, but I the 10-man thing I think might be the standard going forward until we get to the playoffs. And I don't know where you stand on who gets cut from the rotation, but it feels like Max. But again, I don't know if that's a smart move. And Brady has mentioned that he doesn't think this team is deep enough to play 10, and I completely get it. Now I think with this new roster, you probably got to end up if you're gonna, you know, bring it down to 9, it's gonna be Strus or Love most likely. And I think Zeller's minutes get cut a whole lot to whenever obviously Bam is not on the floor. But, you know, last night, you know, we saw a lineup just going through some of the game stuff. We saw a lineup with Kyle, Vic, Strus, Caleb, and Omer, aka no Jimmy, no Bam, and no Tyler. So that felt like a little bit of a trolley lineup. We're obviously not going to see that in the playoffs. You know, you can't have any of that. But just to go over some of the stuff here, like Jimmy without Bam this season, negative 5.35. Bam without Jimmy this season, negative 2.30. Just in the minutes when the both of them are not on the floor together, they're generally not. They're losing those minutes. So that's why I'm kind of harping on the good ones that I've seen, the good lineups, and just like, you know, stick to those. Figure out what works, what combinations work, and stick to those, because you clearly have not figured it out when those guys are not playing with each other. Because when they are, they're plus 5.21 net rating. So, you know, it kind of comes down to figuring out the rotations, and you know, that's what this last month or two is about.
Yeah, and I think you're onto something when you said odd men out, and you mentioned Kevin Love with Max Strus, and I think a lot of people probably like in their head go, "What?" because he starts, right? But I think to your point, when they start to lean in defense, and if they need to size down, and if Spoelstra is going to trust the guys who can switch everything and do the things that he just can feel better about defensively, I just can't shake the fact that I think that that's the direction that they go, because Kevin Love is brought in as a front court player, but I don't think anyone expected him to necessarily be a closer. And yes, he's starting because that is something that they likely agreed for him to do. But then this summer, he can go out and he can find another starting job elsewhere if he would like to. And you know what? ODM Performance can assist him in finding a job if he needs it. They work with notable banks, law firms, and even supermarkets nationwide. Not that Kevin Love's going to be working at any of those. I'm just joking now. But ODM Performance, they're in Dade, Broward, Boca, and they're looking for one of the following positions in C&I lender, C&I credit, business development officer, branch manager. So again, law firms, supermarkets, notable banks, they work with all of them. If you need to get a job, call George or Josh at 954-434-0634 or email at info@odmpsi.com. Again, that's ODM Performance Solutions. They can help you find a job in banking, law firms, and supermarkets nationwide. 954-434-0634. So my hot take as we head into the play-in and the playoff rotation talk is that Haywood Highsmith is going to have a moment where Eric Spoelstra is going to insert him in at some point. Fans may jeer at that, but I just have a feeling that in the defensive matchup game, he's going to get a look somewhere. Alex, am I crazy for saying that? What are your thoughts on that? Kind of as we close up shop here in terms of all of the different guys that might get a look. I feel like he's one of the only guys on the outside looking in that has a shot. Do you have any other guy that you think could get a shot? Duncan, anyone else?
No, I don't think Duncan plays in the playoffs unless, again, like Max just doesn't make a three from now until April, like the end of April. I think Max is probably in there. I think Spo just is more trusting of him at this point. The Highsmith thing is kind of a good call, though. Like, once you said it, I'm like, that actually makes sense. Now, even though we've been talking this whole pod about them shortening the rotation, they are currently looking down the barrel of being a playing team. And once you get out of there, if things were to stay as they are now, you're getting the Boston Celtics in the first round. And guess who's played against the Boston Celtics a good amount this season? Haywood Highsmith. Now, obviously, that was before, that was kind of the first version of this team, as I alluded to, before they made their acquisitions, before Gabe was the starter, and things kind of changed with the way that the rotation is structured. So we don't know what that would look like now, but I do think there is something to the way that Highsmith was defending the Celtic Stars, and just having a guy in there who you feel good about just kind of matched up there, because the less like extra help that they have to send, I think the better, where you can kind of, they're always helping. That's just what they do as a defensive game plan. But I think you want to be able to trust a guy out there without having to compromise your defense and give up even more and easier open looks to the Celtics. So I think the Highsmith thing is kind of a good call. I don't know how that would fit logistically, right? And just something I wanted to throw in here. Jimmy and Zeller, by the way, we were talking about how feasible Jimmy without Bam lineups can be. Jimmy plus Zeller in 73 minutes so far, plus 8.59 net. So that's actually something, really nice to, I think, you can hone off of there. Just figure out some of those Jimmy non-Bam minutes. And then when you plug in Tyler there, it's like a plus 24 net. So there are some good things there. Obviously, it's a much shorter sample, so that's not going to hold up. But as far as just having decent lineups, I think there's something there. Just, I think now is the time where they should never play another stretch without at least one of Jimmy or Bam on, and at the very least have Tyler on the floor, right, with maybe Kyle, Vic, you know what I mean, if you're going to be doing something like that. But like, if you really care about getting out of the 7th seed, it's now or never when it comes to playing your best players a little bit more. And I just don't know how much of a priority it is that they're going to shake up their rotation at this point and kind of go to a playoff rotation early on. I think they're going to keep on going with what they've done so far, and Jimmy's still going to get about 32, 33 minutes a game until, they're actually in the play-in.
Yeah, no, I think you're right about that. I do think that once the play-in arrives, or if a crucial game that decides something related to the play-in happens later in the season, for instance, bear with me here as I get to it. I'm just looking at their schedule here. They close the season at Philadelphia, at Washington, and then at home against Orlando. If any of those games matter, I could see Jimmy really ramping up just so that they make sure that they secure a victory, and then playing is what it is. But ultimately, I think you're right. They're going to stick it out with Spoelstra playing more options than not. The Utah Jazz game being the template we have to look after. I personally think it's one of the more murky rotations in terms of who it's going to be that actually is playing heading into the playoffs that I've seen in a while. So I think it's, again, Spoelstra has had I feel like it's been a tough season for everyone. This is another big challenge for the coaching staff to figure out a rotation that works. With all of the, the shooting struggles and such. So it is a huge task for them. And Alex, I know that you posted some stuff for our subscribers on Off the Floor last night that I think would be beneficial for this episode. So let's provide the listeners here with that information now. Make sure you subscribe. It's only $3.05 a month, $3.05. So we'll keep feeding you draft content, playoff content, free agent content. Alex, you got the numbers ready?
Yes, sir. So I was looking through some stuff last night after our episode, just because I was, as we were doing the episode, and you could obviously check that out on YouTube or wherever you're listening to this, with Brian Fonseca after the Jazz game. I talked about how some of their, strengths from this season have kind of fallen off over the past little while, and not to be, just negative after a good win and whatever. Just I think that, not only is figuring out the lineup and the rotations important, they've got to get back to caring about the. And so, not to be a Jimmy Butler shill, I'm just going to keep kind of going back to that because, they have a blueprint for how to win games. And I think, like, you look at, and I mentioned this on the show last night, their defensive rating being 22nd since All-Star break, 18th if you filter to when Lowry was out. It was 4th before then, right? If you look at their turnover percentage, it's been 26 since the All-Star break. It was 21st when Lowry was out and 10th before then. If you look at, their mid-range accuracy, the actual only thing that they're good at on offense when it comes to converting shots in the half court is in the mid-range. So it's not necessarily long mid-range. They take a lot of the shorter ones. Jimmy, Bam, Tyler, and even Gabe do. And they were 7th in mid-range accuracy and doing it on a pretty high volume, I believe, top 10. But since February 2nd, they're 17th. So you look at that, and then you also factor in the fact that they were 3rd in defensive rebound percentage until February 2nd, and since then 18th. A lot of stuff that they were very good at has fallen off. So I think, like I said, figure out the lineups and rotations and get back to the stuff that you were good at all season. And then, you can go from there because they're obviously hitting a little bit more threes now. And we've seen what happens when they don't do what they need to do. And it all starts with the defensive end, getting stops, that the turnovers, the forcing turnovers is not falling off. So you can take solace in that. But the actual defense outside of that, the rebounding, getting back to hitting mid-range shots at a certain high level because they were actually good at that. And they need every single one of those shots that they can take, especially in the playoffs. Just get back to what you're good at.
Jimmy Butler on Prize Picks for the 23 games remaining, which they did this at the All-Star break. Super cool props on Prize Picks. He was at 3 in terms of over or under 30-plus point games. So that reads as it has to be 31 or more points. He is at exactly 3. I expect him to go over that prop on Prize Picks, which is the coolest daily fantasy app out there. You can also use it on desktop at prizepicks.com. Use the code 5 to get your initial deposit matched up to $100. You choose your favorite sports, choose your favorite players, look at the stats, choose over or under the numbers that are set, watch the games, and win up to 10 times your money. You can do flex plays, power plays. Use the code 5 to get your initial deposit matched up to $100. I also took over 3.5 Bam 30-plus point games. He's had one 30-point game, but that doesn't count because it wasn't 30-plus. So he's still at 0, and now I'm feeling really scared about the over 3.5 30+ point games in the last 23 games for Bam Adebayo. Nevertheless, it is a lot of fun to play. Use the code 5 to get your deposit matched. Thank you for joining us for this episode. We are diving into the rotation. We promise to have you covered as the Miami Heat continue against the Memphis Grizzlies. Who else do they have this week? I'm trying to get my bearings straight in terms of who the Miami Heat are up against. They have the Grizzlies at home, and then they end up on the road
Bulls,
in
the Pistons.
Chicago and Detroit. The fun trip through the Midwest. So we will have you covered throughout. Thank you for joining us. For Alex Toledo, Greg Sylvander, good night.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Regional Sports Network.